Hello, my name is Ilya, and today I am going to present The Maze Runner: The Fever Code, the last book in the Maze Runner series by James Dashner. It's obviously presented by me. So first, let's talk about the author. James Smith Dashner, born in November 26, 1972, is an American writer of speculative fiction. He is the New York Times best-selling author of many books for kids and adults. Born and raised in Georgia, he now lives with his family in the Rocky Mountains. Some of his favorite things to do in his free time is to read, obviously, watch movies, TV shows, and even ski. Now let's talk about the book. The story has a third-person omniscient narrator. It is a third-person point of view, meaning that the narration mostly focuses on the main character's thoughts and views of the world, and it, quite sadly, is the last book to the Maze Runner series. So let's talk about the main character here. So the main character is a young teenage boy called Thomas. His real name is Stefan, however, he had his name changed just like all the other kids in Wicked. Thomas is a tough and smart boy who is a prodigy in the organization. He has special access to places where most of the people aren't allowed to come. Being a kind-hearted teenager, he cared a lot about his friends by protecting them from the crazy people. Also, Thomas would always question himself whether the organization he works for is good or evil. And there is no description about him because he has been described in the Maze Runner, the Scorched Trails, and the Death Cure. So there is no description here. So the first minor character is Newt. Newt is described as being rather tall and muscular, with blonde hair that came down over his shoulders and a square jaw. He is introduced to us in the middle of the story while almost everyone is immune to the virus, though Newt is one of the people who can't withstand it. And our second minor character, coming from the last book, is Teresa, or as they called her, Dee Dee. She is described as being thin but not too small, roughly 5.5 feet, with burning blue eyes and skin that was pale with white pearls. Teresa had silky tar black hair with long legs and pink lips. She is highly intelligent and quite tough. However, these descriptions were not found in this book. I went back and found some in the first book, The Maze Runner, which is how I have all of her descriptions here. And our third minor character is Albie. He is described as being a dark shine boy with short cropped hair and face clean shaven. Albie is introduced to us in the middle of the story. However, unlike Newt, he is immune to the flare. So, another minor character is Minho. He is an Asian boy. He has strong arms. He is short, and obviously he has black hair. He is introduced to us in the middle of the story too, just like Albie and Newt, and he is also immune to the virus. And the last minor character is Chuck. He was introduced in the middle of the story. He is quite a lot of years younger than the rest of the people. However, he likes to flirt with older girls in a cute way. The story is basically the continuation of the previous book. It takes place in the future in North America, Alaska to be precise, and the world has been ravaged with sun flares and a deadly disease called the flare, and it appears that the characters are in a highly secured base. So here's a quote from one of the from the Chancellor talking about Wicked. He says that world in catastrophe kills an experiment department, generally abbreviated to Wicked, is a flagellous organization formed to find the solution to the flare pandemic. So the main conflict is external. The corporation known as Wicked is trying to find a cure for the deadly virus. Just like Mark and his friends from the last prequel, this place is also fighting for survival. Even though the sun flares that ravage the earth are left behind in the past, the virus is showing no signs of slowing down. And here's a quote. But I started noticing symptoms recently, she continued. Even the counselor himself is showing signs of infection. I'm almost certain now that our beloved leader has been fudging the reports. I saw Randall on the security feeds tonight, and if Randall is sick, well, it's impossible. He's the only one. So this is a quote by Dr. Ava Page. So, the first important thing that happens in this book is that Thomas has a horrible first impression of Wicked. They torture him in order for him to accept his new name, which was Stefan. And here's a quote about that. Until this moment, Stefan hadn't known pain outside of scrapes and bruises of childhood. And so it was when the fiery tempest exploded through his body. When the agony erupted in his veins and muscles, he had no words for it, no capacity to understand. There were only the screams that barely reached his own ears before his mind shut down and saved him. And the second most important thing that happens in the story is that Thomas meets a girl named Teresa. She talks about her past, and then she reveals that her actual name is Didi, the girl from the previous book. So the next thing that happens, which is very important, is that Thomas and Teresa meet a bunch of new people while secretly wandering around Wicked. They meet three people, Newt, Albie, and Minho. So this is a quote where Minho tells them, first things first, let's meet Albie and Minho, because they were also wandering around the base. So he wanted to introduce them to Albie and Minho. And then the next thing that happens is that Thomas continues working on the maze daily with Teresa. When it's complete, his friends, including Minho and Newt that he hung out with almost every day, prepare to be inserted in the maze. And the next thing that happens after the friends are inserted into the maze is that 2 years later, Thomas creates a plan to request his insertion into the maze with his memories intact. Once he is inside, he'll lead the Gliders in a revolt and an escape to a safe zone in a nearby city. However, Counselor Page gives Thomas a cup of tea, which makes him pass out. His memories are removed before guards dropping in the elevator to the maze. Later in the story, Chancellor Page admits to infecting the Wicked staff with the flare to prevent them from stopping the trials after the maze. I want to say the words to you anyway. Explain myself. It was me who infected Chancellor Anderson and his senior staff. They wanted to end things after the maze trial. They wanted to give up, and I could never allow that. Could I? What what we're trying to achieve is too much important. And the final thing that happens is that it is revealed that Teresa didn't have her memory removed. She was pretending all that time to monitor Thomas. This is the last thing we hear. This is the last thing that is written in the Maze Runner trilogy, as the Fever Code is the last novel. I feel good about the plan to leave my and Eris's memories intact. You need someone in each group with whom you can communicate and plan during the phases of the trials. So in my opinion, the theme is expect the unexpected. The main thing that happened in this story is that we understood that Teresa didn't have her memory removed at all, and she was lying until the very end of her life, which was in death cure. Dr. Page also lied to Thomas, Teresa, Eris, and Rachel. She said that several people had gotten the flu somehow. However, it was her idea and her plan to make them infected because they wanted to stop the maze trials. That's why you should always have your eyes open and shouldn't trust anyone. And here's a quote: "We never knew who the final candidates would be, but today we are happy to celebrate Teresa and Eris and their loyalties to our purpose here." So basically, Dr. Page ditched Thomas and Rachel. So the general tone of the story is curiosity. The reason being, this book is about answering all the questions the readers might have had in the last four books. It even says it in the synopsis. It says that it's gonna reveal a lot of questions that have been asked throughout these four books. And I think the mood is curiosity and is curious and very anxious. Because I think the author did a great job at creating the tone, and it actually makes me feel very anxious. It makes me even more curious every time the author drops a bombshell. As they say, by answering a question, you always get a new one. And the quote is for Mood is that it's your incalculable ability to trust others that has always touched me, she said, looking sadly into his eyes. Her face had started to blur, and I'm sorry to have taken advantage of it so many times. I've just always done what needed to be done. And for tone, the quote is, "Thomas, come with me," the man said. Stefan, my name is Stefan." So we realize what the actual truth is. So Thomas's name was actually Stefan, and Dr. Page was actually using Thomas the whole time. In conclusion, the Fever Code included ideas that I appreciated and disliked. First, this novel is a prequel, so I recommend you read the other four books before this one. Moving on, after reading the novel and analyzing the Fever Code, I give it a 5 out of 5. I am not a fan of prequels, however, this was something else. This book made me think as if I'm in a quest room solving puzzles. It was arguably one of the best books I've ever read. The plot could have been a little faster though. However, everything should be left as it is because it won't get better than this. If you're into dystopian or science fiction, then I highly recommend you read the Maze Runner series. Thank you and have a great day. Goodbye.